Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. America is a superpower on the decline. I know, what a statement to start with a Monday. But hear me out. This is what happened in China today. The US sent one of its top diplomats to talk to the Chinese. It did not go as planned. The Americans wanted to rein in the Chinese. They came back with two lists, a list of demands and a list of concerns. It seems like Beijing is setting the terms of re-engagement with America. We'll bring you details of what happened in that meeting and why was this meeting called in the first place. The second part of our story on why we say that this is a superpower that is stumbling is what is happening in Afghanistan. The Americans thought they would leave without a peace deal, leave without a proper agreement. The Taliban seized the opportunity, so much so that the Americans are having to indulge in some last-minute maneuvers. And so they've dispatched US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to India. He'll be in India this week, possibly to seek India's help in salvaging the situation in Afghanistan. We'll discuss both these stories to tell you why Joe Biden and his foreign policy is not going as the Americans would have liked it. Also on the show tonight, Imran Khan's party has won another sham election. The opposition refuses to accept the result. We'll tell you what happened in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Why is China cracking down on the country's business giants? First Tencent, then online tutoring companies, and now food delivery platforms. Why are they facing the dragon's wrath? What's happening in Tunisia, the country where the Arab Spring began? 10 years on, why are protesters out on the streets? The president has sacked the prime minister and suspended the parliament. We'll tell you what happened. And the British government is launching a surveillance app to fight obesity of all things. It's a story you don't want to miss. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
According to the Israeli military, Israeli warplanes struck a Hamas military base in the southern Gaza Strip. The airstrike came several hours after incendiary balloons were launched into Israel by activists linked to Hamas. That caused at least 3 blazes in southern Israel. China reported 76 new COVID-19 cases on July 25th. This is the highest daily total since January, amid a surge of local infections in the eastern city of Nanjing. Kidnappers who raided a boarding school in northern Nigeria have now released 28 children, while another 81 remain in captivity. The kidnapping was the latest by heavily armed gangs that have long plagued northwest and central Nigeria. Dozens of people gathered in Islamabad to mourn the death of Noor Muqaddam, a Pakistani woman who was killed earlier this week. The 27-year-old woman, who was the daughter of a former senior Pakistani diplomat, was beheaded in the Pakistani capital. Israel on Sunday announced that it will cut its carbon emissions by 85% from 2015 levels by the middle of this century. The government has approved the 2050 plan and has also set an interim target of 2030 to reduce emissions by 27% from the 2015 levels. Despite protests, the French parliament has voted to make vaccine passports a key part of daily life in the battle against COVID-19. The health pass would be required for the French to visit venues like cinemas or nightclubs. One of the most devastating fires in Spain's northeastern region over the last 2 years was stabilized overnight. 400 firefighters on the ground, supported by 18 helicopters, have been trying to contain the blaze. Thousands were left without power after tornadoes struck the U.S. state of Michigan, damaging trees and residential buildings. At least one person suffered minor injuries. Skateboarding is making its debut at the Tokyo Games, and the sport has delivered the youngest ever podium in Olympic history. 13-year-old Momiji Nishia of Japan won the gold medal in the women's street final, pipping another 13-year-old Raisa Leal of Brazil. Bronze was won by the 16-year-old Funa Nakayama, making the average age of the three medalists just over 14 years. 20-year-old Australian Ariarne Titmus has won a thrilling gold medal in the women's 400-meter freestyle at the Tokyo Games. The reigning world champion came from behind to beat defending champion and world record holder Katie Ledecky in the second fastest time ever. Meanwhile, the Americans made it a hat-trick of Olympic golds in the men's 4x100-meter freestyle relay with the fastest time of the textile suits era.
Joe Biden assumed presidency with three famous words: America is back. Back to support allies, back to lead the world, back to reign in rogue states, back. But 7 months into this presidency, America appears like it's back to square one, back to ending old conflicts and starting new ones. There's chaos. Its foreign policy initiatives are backfiring and a superpower is stumbling its way out of a war. Joe Biden promised to keep China in check. He's failed so far, so much so that today Beijing was dictating the terms of re-engagement with Washington. Biden also ordered the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's proving to be a disaster. The botch-up is epic. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on his way to India to seek India's support to salvage the situation in Kabul. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss where these efforts are going. We'll start with China. America wants to reign in China. Or so they claim. America also wants to re-engage with China. After 7 months of talking tough, the US dispatched Wendy R. Sherman to the Chinese city of Tianjin. Sherman is the Deputy Secretary of State. You could say the junior minister, the junior foreign minister of America. The meeting happened today, and to call it confrontational would be an understatement. Chinese diplomats unleashed a barrage of attacks on the US. The Chinese vice foreign minister said that some Americans portray China as a quote-unquote, as an imagined enemy, and that America is trying to contain and suppress China. Allow me to read some of the statements that stood out. This is what they said. In fact, they said that it seems that the whole of government and whole of society campaign is being waged to bring China down. The US keeps making an issue with China. It is as if the US has nothing to talk about except China. This is what the Chinese told the Americans. Before the meeting, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi issued a statement. He said that China would give the US a tutorial, those were the words he used, a tutorial on how to treat other nations equally. The Chinese side came prepared with what to do at the meeting. Blame America for everything. By the end of it, it's what it must do to repair the relationship. Chinese diplomats gave the Americans two lists. The first was a list of demands from China to America. What do they want? No visa restrictions on Communist Party members, their families and Chinese students. Removal of sanctions on Communist Party members. No restrictions on Confucius Institutes and Chinese companies. Stop tagging Chinese media as foreign agents. And drop the request to extradite Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou. Meng, as you would know, is in Canada at the moment. America has sought her extradition and she's been fighting a case against the US government in a court in Canada over this. She doesn't want to go to the US to be extradited. Now, this is the first list, the list of demands that the Chinese made. What about the second list? China has called it a list of concerns. It includes everything that the Biden administration might use to corner Beijing on international forums, from the genocide in Xinjiang to the origins of the Wuhan virus.
We also expressed strong dissatisfaction with the US regarding its wrong words and actions on issues such as the COVID-19 origin tracing, Taiwan, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and the South China Sea. We demanded the US immediately stop interfering in China's internal affairs, stop damaging China's interests, stop stepping on red lines and playing with fire or engaging in provocation.
Basically, China wants to have the cake and eat it too. It wants America to accept its foreign policy positions on the pandemic, on Taiwan, on Hong Kong, on South China Sea, and on Xinjiang. Earlier this year, Joe Biden had promised to hold China to account. He said that China will pay a price for its human rights abuses. Well, going by today's meeting, it's not going as planned, at least for the Americans. And speaking of poor planning and execution, let's also look at what's happening in Afghanistan. Almost all US troops have left. The Afghan government is struggling. The Taliban is expanding control. The US wanted to leave without a ceasefire or a peace deal. But the situation is so bad and the casualty is so high that the US is being forced to engage in some last-minute diplomacy for a face-saver. Something to show for, in fact, after a 2-decade-long war. So US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has scheduled a sudden trip to New Delhi. He's expected to arrive on Wednesday. This will be a 2-day visit. Blinken will meet India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. The agenda is clear: the Afghan turmoil and Pakistan's financing of terrorists. And since it's the Americans who believe they have a monopoly and moral high ground on human rights and democracy, expect a few lines on those too. Even on the back foot, the US won't stop lecturing the world. But the rude welcome in China and the chaos in Afghanistan should serve as reminders. We don't live in a unipolar world anymore where the US enjoys superpower status. The United States is a world power on the decline. So while Joe Biden might say that America is back, it's not getting the red carpet welcome it thinks it deserves. And we are not done with Afghanistan yet. As the Taliban gains ground, the concerns around a terror outfit running a country are mounting by the day. The situation is dire. So much so that the Afghan army chief has postponed his visit to India. The United Nations has warned of unprecedented casualties in the days ahead. And miles away in Australia, the trial of a soldier has led to some shocking revelations on war crimes. In the next 4 minutes, we'll bring you up to speed with all these developments. We'll start with the way things stand today, July 26th. The Taliban says it controls 90% of the Afghan border, including all crucial security outposts. This is according to a recent claim made by a Taliban spokesperson. Now look at this map. The Taliban says it controls 224 districts. Another 110 districts are being contested. What does the government have? 73 districts under its control. You could contest these numbers, but not the trend. Kabul clearly is on the back foot. And as the situation worsens, the Afghan army chief has postponed his visit to India. General Wali Mohammad Ahmadzai was scheduled to be in New Delhi this week. He was to meet Indian Army Chief General Naravne and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. The visit was important for more reasons than one for both sides involved. India wanted to discuss how to secure its interests, its investments in Afghanistan. Kabul would have sought more support from New Delhi. The Afghan Army Chief was also expected to travel to Pune, where Afghan cadets are being trained. And the visit would have coincided with that of US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who, as I just said, will be in India this week. So India, the US and Afghanistan could have explored the possibility of discussing the situation on one platform here in New Delhi. But that's not going to happen because violence in Afghanistan is at its peak. The Taliban is attacking not just government forces, but also civilians. According to the United Nations, there have been more than 1,600 civilian deaths in 2021 alone. 1,600. And the UN has warned of unprecedented casualties in the days to come. Look at this graph. According to the United Nations, between January and June this year, a total of 1,659 civilians were killed and more than 3,500 civilians were injured. This is a 47% rise in casualties compared with the same period last year, 47%. And the figure is only set to grow worse unless some urgent action is taken to stem this violence. Also, who exactly is behind these killings? The UN has not named anyone, but the report says 64% of the killings have been carried out by anti-government forces, aka the Taliban. Pro-government forces account for 25% of these deaths, and the remaining 11% died in the crossfire. This is what the UN says. Now, we understand the crossfire bit. Nobody's safe in a conflict zone, but pro-government forces accounting for 25% of the killings is a rather steep figure. Why would they kill civilians? Now, this is a question that Australia has been forced to ask too. A total of 26,000 Australian troops have served in Afghanistan since the war began. 26,000 Australians in the last 20 years. Some 400 remained when America announced the withdrawal this year. They've all returned home now, and some of them face accusations of war crimes. Like Ben Robert Smith, a recipient of the Victoria Cross, one of the most decorated soldiers in Australian military history. We've done several reports on him in the past. Smith served in Afghanistan as a patrol commander in the year 2012. He left full-time service in 2013. He became the general manager of a major Australian television network. In 2017, an independent inquiry by the Australian Defence Force put Smith's actions in Afghanistan under scrutiny. He was accused of war crimes. And the most notable one was the killing of an alleged Taliban spy called Ali Jan. Now, last month, the trial in this case began, and the eyewitness accounts are horrifying. A court proceeding earlier today had this coming to light. The first Afghan witness in the trial appeared via video link from Kabul, and this witness is the nephew of Ali Jan, the man whom Smith allegedly killed. So what did this witness say? Allow me to quote. This is what it says. A big soldier with blue eyes repeatedly punched, kicked and pushed me. He kicked my uncle really hard, after which he fell on his back. Another soldier pointed a pistol on my forehead after I denied being a member of the Taliban. My uncle's hands were then tied in the back and he was pushed over a cliff. He was rolling down until he reached the river. I lost sight of the body, but later heard gunshots being fired and saw the body being dragged by two soldiers. He had nothing on him. He had no equipment with him. They put those things with his body. These were just a few excerpts from the testimony. There were many more dreadful revelations made by this eyewitness. Allegations that 42-year-old Smith has consistently denied. He says these allegations are false, they're baseless, without any foundation in truth. But the evidence before Australian prosecutors is too hard to ignore. This trial will go on for a few more weeks and we'll be tracking all the developments closely. So as of the 26th of July, here's what we have. A security situation that is going from bad to worse. A warning of unprecedented killings in the days ahead. And a soldier on trial for war crimes in Afghanistan. What's common between all these developments is the endless suffering of the people of Afghanistan. The story is far from over. Our next story is from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. On Sunday, the residents of POK went to polls. Elections were held in a militarily occupied region. There can obviously be no legal basis to such an election. What they do at best is maintain a pretense of independence in a region like this. But you've got to trust Pakistan to fail at even maintaining such a pretense. Our next report tells you how.
Violence, chaos, and irregularities. All three were on display as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir went to polls on Sunday. The election was meant to showcase self-determination in the region. What they did instead was expose the sham of independence that Islamabad tries to sell. What you see are members of Pakistan's ruling party, PTI, clashing with the workers of other parties. Such clashes were reported at polling booths across POK. PTI workers are being accused of assaulting local candidates, threatening election officials, uprooting opposition camps, altering voter lists, and rigging the ballot. So the winner should come as no surprise. Imran Khan's party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. The POK Assembly has a total of 53 seats, but only 45 seats are directly elected. The remaining 8 are reserved for women and technocrats. How many seats did the PTI win? With 8 seats being won by the Pakistan People's Party, 6 by the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, and 7 seats by local Kashmiri parties. The PTI has emerged as the single largest party, but the election is being called a sham. First, because the PTI has the backing of the Pakistan army. And second, because it used violence to secure a win. The opposition in Pakistan is calling out this fraud, refusing to accept the results. The Pakistan People's Party says there is proof of systematic rigging in the election with a clear difference between the voter lists of several polling stations. The Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz says PTI has been allowed to engage in hooliganism with complete liberty. The party's goons attacked our offices and rigged the elections. So what happens next? The PTI will form a government in POK and is expected to appoint this man, Sultan Mahmood Chaudhry, as the region's prime minister. Now, first of all, there is no legal basis to such an election. POK is a contested region. And secondly, the appointment of a prime minister in POK has nothing to do with self-determination. The government of POK is toothless. It has powers equivalent to that of a district magistrate. Yes, there's a prime minister, a president, and a legislative assembly, but they're all in name only. The real power resides with the Prime Minister of Pakistan, who chairs the upper house, called the Kashmir Council. This council runs from Islamabad and is dominated by cronies of the establishment. It is these people who take the final call on everything that has to do with Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Then why hold an election at all? To maintain the pretense of independence in occupied Kashmir and to fool the world on how Islamabad lets Kashmiris enjoy the right to self-determination and self-governance. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Loyalists in power, committees made up of hand-picked officials and one leader calling the shots from the capital city. That's how Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is being run. Islamabad seems to be learning a few tricks from its iron brother, China. This is, of course, the typical Chinese playbook. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping is improvising on these tricks, taking power grab to a whole new level. And at the receiving end are China's tech giants. Here is one story. It's about a businessman called Larry Chen. He used to be a teacher. Then he started an online education business called Gaotu Tech Edu. It made him a billionaire, literally a rags to riches story, the kind that should be celebrated. 6 months ago, Larry Chen had a net worth of well over $10 billion. He was one of the richest people in the world. I say was because his fortunes have plummeted since, thanks to the government of China. The shares of his company have lost 98% of their value, 98%. Personally, Larry Chen lost more than $15 billion. You could call it the Great Fall of China, but this isn't funny. How did this happen? China has told online tutoring services to stop making a profit. It has told businesses to stop making a profit. That's banned now. Companies like the one that Larry Chen owns can no longer work for profit. They will have to register as non-profits. And no new services will be approved. Local authorities have been told to not allow any new players in this sector. The result is a no-brainer. Losses worth billions of dollars for major players in the edu-tech sector in China. Their stocks tanked. The biggest names are bleeding money. China's TAL Education is one of the major players in the country. It is also listed in New York. Before the crackdown, the company was valued at $59 billion. Now it has dropped to less than $4 billion. Gaotu Tech Edu, the company that Larry Chen owns, is the biggest loser in this churn. It was valued at $38 billion. Now the company is worth less than $1 billion. Analysts at Goldman Sachs have come up with a forecast. They say that China's tutoring market will shrink by 76%. Before the new rules came into play, the sector was valued at well over $100 billion. Now it is expected to fall to $24 billion. Why would China do this? Why would any government make some of its best performing companies fail? It's complicated, so listen to this carefully. China's population is aging and shrinking. It wants its citizens to have more babies. Earlier, there was a one-child policy, one child for every couple. That was the law. Then they made it a two-child policy so that people could have more children. And now they'll allow more than 2 children per couple. The problem is couples don't want more children because it's expensive to raise them. So the government is trying to make raising a child less expensive in China with lower tuition fee. It's a convoluted plan, yes. And paying for this plan will be China's edutech companies. Overnight, they've been barred from making money, making profits, to be specific. They've lost billions of dollars. Basically, China is making new mistakes to fix old ones. You see, when China opened up, the world had hoped that the state will take the back seat, that it will allow market forces to shape the economy. But the dream run is over now. The Communist Party is stepping back in. It is telling CEOs how they should be running their business, especially in the technology sector. And online tutoring is just one part of the story. Tencent is the latest victim of this crackdown, one of the many victims. The company that owns apps like WeChat, Tencent has been told it cannot own exclusive music rights. And these orders come straight from the Chinese regulator. So why is this a big deal? Look at Tencent's might. It controls more than 80% of China's exclusive music rights. That should change now. The company has been given 30 days to stop being the dominant player, plus a fine of more than $77,000. That is Tencent's reward for being on top of its game. So far, almost all major technology companies have been fined in the ongoing regulatory crackdown in China. It began with Jack Ma's Alibaba. You might remember this story. The online retailer was asked to cough up $2.8 billion. Chinese regulators suspended the IPO of Jack Ma's Ant Group last year, a public offering that was well worth over $34 billion. And just this month, China pulled all apps owned by ride-hailing service Didi. The company lost $22 billion in market capitalization due to the crackdown over user privacy. And China's next target is delivery services. Beijing is bringing in new rules for Chinese food delivery platforms. They have been asked to guarantee riders an income that is above the minimum pay. Companies have been asked to provide insurance to riders, relax deadlines for deliveries. The Chinese state now also wants to dictate when food orders should be delivered. China's tech companies are being asked to bend to the state's will. Entrepreneurs are losing control of their own businesses, even though they own them. Why is this happening? Because Xi Jinping wants to control big tech and to turn them into tools that will serve his political agenda. This is China's new economic model, it seems, state capitalism. It's a story that's still unfolding. 10 years after the Arab Spring, Tunisia is witnessing unrest again. The country is caught in political and economic turmoil. The president has sacked the prime minister, the defense minister and the justice minister. He's also suspended the legislature. And now he wants to rule the country himself. Some are celebrating the decision, saying it was necessary. Some others are protesting, calling the president's actions unconstitutional. What is the situation on the ground? How is the world reacting to these developments? And who exactly is this president who wants to be Tunisia's new ruler? Here's a report.
Tunisia is where the Arab Spring began. It is also celebrated as a success model of the revolution. But the country is now caught in political and economic turmoil. It began with the ouster of Hichem Mechichi, the Prime Minister of Tunisia. On the 25th of July, Hichechi was suspended from his post by President Kais Saied. Next, the country's parliament was suspended.
First decision, freezing the functions of the parliament. The constitution does not allow its dissolution, but it allows the freezing of its activities. Second decision, the lifting of the parliamentary immunity of all deputies.
Why has the Prime Minister been sacked? The President says there was growing public resentment against him over his handling of the Wuhan virus outbreak and some economic and political decisions which the President thinks were unconstitutional. So who is going to take his place? Who will be the next Prime Minister? The President himself.
Third decision, The President of the Republic will take charge of the executive power with the help of the government, which will be headed by a new leader appointed by the President of the Republic.
بمساعدة حكومة يرأسها رئيس الحكومة.
Kais Saied wants to rule Tunisia. His supporters are celebrating on the streets of the capital city. There are fireworks, cheering and honking. There are protests too. Supporters of the ousted Prime Minister are clashing with the supporters of the President, hurling stones and insults, calling the President's move a coup.
These are coup decisions. Tunisia is a democratic country. It cannot go a step backwards. We will keep going until all the institutions get restituted and resume their previous work.
We will not accept what's happening. We are with you guys. You have the capabilities and we are not giving up.
It's a civil war-like situation. The world is watching. Germany has asked the Tunisian government to return to constitutional order.
We have been watching the violence and escalation closely in the last weeks. And of course, yesterday's escalation, which we are very concerned about. We think it's important now to return really quickly to the constitutional order. And we call on everyone to help guarantee compliance and the implementation of constitution.
Turkey too has rejected the suspension of the government. It says the president's decision lacks constitutional legitimacy. Russia has weighed in but refused to pick a side. Moscow says it is just monitoring the situation. But with the president showing no interest in following the constitution, the situation is only set to get worse. Can the president get away with it? How powerful is he? Kais Saied's rise to power is a little-known story. For the longest time, he taught law at Tunis University and was a constitutional lawyer. The 2011 revolution in Tunisia pushed him into mainstream politics. He participated in several political rallies and meetings, building his influence over Tunisia's youth. In 2019, he became the front-runner for the Tunisian presidential election, an election that he won with a big majority. After assuming power, he repeatedly argued for a decentralized democratic model and the suspension of the country's parliament. He has now acted on his argument. Saied has not only suspended Tunisia's parliament but also sacked the prime minister. Which way he takes his country now is anybody's guess. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The pandemic has shown how most governments are not doing enough for the health of its citizens, their citizens. But how much is too much? Well, that's the question that people in the UK should be asking. The government there is developing a surveillance app, not for security monitoring, but health monitoring. According to British media, this app will monitor people's routines and habits. This includes what they do in a day, what they spend their money on, how much they exercise, what they buy at a supermarket. I know it sounds creepy, but you'll be surprised. People seem very excited about this app, at least in the UK. And I'll tell you why. The app will reward those who are healthy. This is apparently the British government's way of incentivizing health. People who go out for walks, who buy more vegetables and fruits, who go for runs, will receive points on the app. And these points can be exchanged for discounts, free concert tickets, other financial rewards. Basically, you get financial benefits for staying healthy. It's a pretty win-win situation. That is, if you discount all the privacy that is being compromised in the process. Reports say several companies, NGOs are already bidding for this app. The project is expected to cost £6 million. That's $9 million. It is predicted it should be rolled out by the end of this year, which means the app will be launched just in time for the New Year resolution. Reports say Prime Minister Boris Johnson will promote the app personally. Johnson is said to have switched to a much healthier lifestyle post-COVID recovery. The Prime Minister blamed his weight for the complications that he faced after having been infected by the Wuhan virus. He even disclosed that he has given up chocolate and late-night cheese since he recovered. This healthy switch is now reflecting in his government's policies, it seems. The UK will reportedly be banning junk food ads on television before 9 p.m. This ban will be applicable starting 2023. And starting next year, restaurants in the UK will be required to display calorie counts on their menus. So will home delivery services. They will have to put labels showing calorie counts. And there's a reason why the UK is taking its health so seriously. 28% of adults in England are obese, more than 36% overweight. This is according to the Health Survey of England 2019. Almost 10% of the children between the age of 4 and 5 years are obese. Almost 10%. More than 13% are overweight. When it comes to the age group of 10 and 11, 21% are obese, more than 14% overweight. This is according to the UK's National Child Measurement Programme. Obesity, you see, is a global problem. According to the World Health Organization, global obesity has nearly tripled since 1975. In 2016, more than 1.9 billion adults were overweight. Of them, 650 million were obese. In 2020, 39 million children under the age of 5 were overweight or obese. Obesity is also preventable. All we need to do is strike the right balance between calories consumed and calories burnt. The increase in intake of sugary and high-fat food has contributed immensely to global obesity. Desk jobs, sedentary lifestyles, they're not helping either. Our lifestyle is making us put on weight. And obesity is not about looking out of shape or feeling fat. What a whole lot of us do not realize, the reason obesity is a problem is because it is linked to health consequences. Obesity can lead to cardiovascular diseases, mainly strokes. It can also lead to breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, cancers in the gallbladder, kidney, colon, liver. Childhood obesity is linked to higher chances of premature death. In short, obesity is deadly. People who are overweight require healthcare services more often and for reasons more complicated. The UK estimates that the NHS could save £100 million if everyone who is overweight loses at least 2.26 kilos. More than 8% of the health budget of the OECD countries will be spent treating the consequences of overweight people over the next 30 years. A recent report from the World Obesity Federation found that Wuhan virus deaths were higher in countries that had more overweight people. The question is, what are governments doing about it? I ask this because what we eat has a lot to do with the environment. Seeing photos of junk food around us makes people crave. So institutional measures are a must when it comes to battling obesity. In the United States, for instance, chain restaurants are required to provide calorie counts on the menu. Australia is mulling a ban on junk food ads. In 2011, France introduced a soda tax. Within 3 years, the consumption of soda declined by more than 6%. Denmark has a similar fat tax on products that have more than 2.3% saturated fat. It applies to meat, full-fat dairy, oil, a whole lot of things. What about India? When it comes to obesity, India's problem is unique and a little more complicated. India is fighting a dual battle here, against obesity and against undernourishment. For the longest time, obesity was a rich person's problem in India. Today, almost 10 million Indian men are overweight, 20 million women are obese. At the same time, 102 million Indian men are underweight, as 101 million women. India is home to 40% of the global underweight population, and 4 out of 10 children in India are undernourished. So a policy intervention like higher taxation can be detrimental to a bigger problem here. In 2019, India banned the sale of junk food in school canteens, also within 50 meters of school campuses. India also has banned junk food ads at school canteens. The move is expected to help young people, young children, make healthier choices and also prevent obesity as they grow up. Well, surveillance for obesity will be a first, a world first, but people in Britain would have been better saved had the government decided to watch the weather instead. Thunderstorms led to flash floods in London. Streets and railway stations are flooded, but the United Kingdom is not the only one dealing with freak weather. From Europe to China and now Japan, they're all staring at more extreme weather events.
The wrath of extreme weather continues. The latest victim is Belgium. These pictures are from the town of Dinant, where a torrent of floodwater just swept away the vehicles. Europe's climate crisis has stunned scientists. Some countries are struggling to contain the floodwaters. The latest victim is London. The situation is extraordinary. Heavy rain triggered flash floods over the weekend. An entire railway station was submerged. While the West battles the storms, in the East, China is now facing Typhoon Infa. In Jiaxing, rescuers had to deploy boats to fetch locals who were trapped. This comes after floods in central China last week took more than 50 lives. Reports say the Chinese have suffered around $10 billion in economic losses due to the floods. For those living in the Henan province, the nightmare continues. Many of them are still scrambling to find their loved ones. On the Chinese internet, people have shared dozens of appeals. There are messages of those who are looking to their friends and families, those who went missing when the floods hit. In Zhengzhou, where people died inside submerged subways, family members refused to leave train stations in a desperate attempt for some news of their loved ones. The horror is far from over. The world could see more freak weather events in the coming days. And this time, the target could be the Tokyo Olympics. A typhoon warning has been issued in Tokyo. Tropical storm Nepartak is developing near southeast Japan. Japanese authorities say there is no reason to worry, but the schedule of some events has been changed. Some events of archery, rowing and sailing have been postponed. After all, the controversies and pandemic scares, the organizers are hoping that this is a storm they'll be spared. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Well, here is the other extreme. Dubai. It is making news for having artificial rain. The city is experiencing a very hot summer, and so it's producing fake rain with the help of drones. How does the technology work? When did the practice of making fake rain or artificial rain begin? And how much has the UAE invested in it? Here's a report.
There are floods in Europe. There are floods in China. It's pouring heavily in India too. Several countries are experiencing extreme weather conditions. But in the United Arab Emirates, the summer is unrelenting. In Dubai, the temperatures are soaring beyond 50 degrees Celsius. To beat the heat, the City of Innovations has come up with another ingenious idea. Artificial rain. What you see is artificial rain, manufactured with the help of drone technology. How does this work? The technique they're relying on is cloud seeding. Drones are launched from a catapult and fly in the air for about 40 minutes. During their flight, drone sensors measure temperature, humidity, and electrical charge within a cloud. This data helps researchers and drone operators know when and where they need to zap. Zapping is a technique where the drones unleash electrical charges, prompting the clouds to coalesce or come together. The electrical charges also jolt the droplets to clump together. When the drops merge and are big enough, they fall off as rain. This technique doesn't involve the use of chemicals and is therefore considered environment friendly. The UAE invested in this technology 4 years ago. In 2017, it paid $15 million to scientists at the University of Reading in England. The move is now paying off. Videos released by the UAE's state weather broadcasters show monsoon-like showers drenching roads and sparking flashes of lightning in the middle of the desert. Sites like these are set to reignite global interest in rainmaking technologies. But the fact is that artificial rains have a long history. In 1946, the first experiment was conducted in New York. This was to tackle severe drought. The process of cloud seeding was invented. It consisted of spraying fine particles in aerosol or powder form into clouds at an altitude of 2,000 to 4,000 meters. Over the years, this led to the invention of two cloud seeding techniques. The first one involved a light aircraft which fires flares filled with sodium chloride or silver iodide crystals into the clouds. The particles play the role of giant nuclei, making it possible for water vapor contained in the cloud to condense into droplets of water. Within 15 to 30 minutes, down comes the rain. The second technique is much cheaper. It involves launching small rockets from the ground containing the particles into the clouds. China, a leader in artificial rain development, uses military equipment already set up in arid regions to launch these rockets. Now Dubai has deployed drones for this technique, but messing with nature has a history of yielding disastrous results. Cloud seeding, too, could result in erratic changes in climate if it's unregulated. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.